Hey guys, tonight we begin with something different, something quieter, something that might help your restless mind finally settle into the kind of deep, peaceful sleep that feels like slipping into another world entirely. We're stepping away from the grand battles and sweeping narratives you might expect from medieval history. Instead, we're going to experience something far more intimate and human. The tense, hushed hours before dawn in a knight's camp, where men wait in silence for what might be their final sunrise. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1347, and somewhere in the rolling hills of northern France, a small encampment sits shrouded in pre-dawn mist. 37 knights and their retainers have made camp in a grove of oak trees, their horses tethered nearby, breathing visible clouds into the cold air. The fire has burned down to glowing embers, casting barely enough light to illuminate the faces of men who cannot sleep. Sir Edmund de Ashby sits on a fallen log, methodically checking his sword for the dozenth time tonight. The blade catches what little light remains from the dying coals. His movements are precise, practiced, almost meditative. Each pass of the whetstone against steel creates a soft, rhythmic whisper that mingles with the distant sound of night birds and the occasional snort from the horses. Across the small clearing, his squire Thomas carefully arranges pieces of armor on a woolen blanket. The mail hauberk lies spread like a metallic skin, each ring catching tiny glints of firelight. Beside it, the great helm sits upright, its eye slits staring blindly into the darkness like the hollow sockets of a skull. Thomas's hands shake slightly as he works, whether from cold or nerves, it's impossible to tell. The silence between the men is heavy with unspoken thoughts. Tomorrow, they will ride with the English army to meet the French at Crécy. Intelligence suggests the enemy force outnumbers them 3-1, perhaps more. These are not favourable odds, even for seasoned warriors who have survived campaigns in Scotland and raids along the Welsh borders. Sir Edmund sets down his whetstone and looks up at the sky. The stars are beginning to fade, which means dawn is still hours away, but the longest part of the night is behind them. He has learned through years of warfare that these quiet hours before battle are often harder to endure than the fighting itself. In combat, there is no time for doubt, no space for fear to take root and grow. There is only action, reaction, and the desperate clarity that comes with survival. But here, in the stillness, the mind wanders to darker places. He thinks of his wife Margaret, probably asleep in their manor house 300 miles away. Does she dream of him tonight? Does some part of her soul sense that her husband sits in a foreign field, preparing for what might be his final dawn? He touches the small leather pouch hanging from his belt, containing a lock of her auburn hair and a fragment of parchment with her careful script. A prayer, copied from their chapel's breviary, asking for protection in battle. Thomas clears his throat softly, breaking the reverie. "My lord, shall I prepare your morning meal?" The boy's voice is barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might shatter something fragile in the air around them. Sir Edmund shakes his head. "Not yet, lad. The sun isn't even thinking of rising. Try to rest if you can. Tomorrow will be a long day." But Thomas doesn't move toward his bedroll. Instead, he continues his careful inventory of equipment, running his fingers along leather straps and checking the sharpness of dagger points. Like his master, he finds comfort in these familiar rituals, these small acts of preparation that create the illusion of control over fate. Near the edge of the camp, Sir William of Gloucester sits with his back against an oak tree, his eyes closed but clearly not asleep. His breathing is too controlled, too measured. At 42, he is the eldest knight in their small company, a veteran of more battles than most men see in 3 lifetimes. His scarred hands rest on his knees, and occasionally his lips move silently. Prayer, perhaps, or simply the habit of speaking to ghosts that only he can see. The horses shift restlessly in their tethers, sensing the tension that hangs over the camp like morning fog. Sir Edmund's destrier, a massive black stallion named Thunder, tosses his head and paws at the ground. These war horses are trained for combat, bred for courage and strength, but they are also intelligent enough to understand when their riders are afraid. A night owl calls from somewhere in the darkness beyond the camp's perimeter, its haunting voice echoing through the trees. The sound seems to hang in the air longer than it should, as if the very atmosphere is reluctant to let it fade. One of the younger knights, Sir Robert, barely 18 and fighting in his first major engagement, crosses himself at the sound. Sir Edmund watches the boy's nervous gesture with understanding rather than judgment. He remembers his own first battle, 20 years ago in the muddy fields of Halidon Hill. The waiting had been the worst part then too, the way time seemed to stretch like heated metal, each minute feeling like an hour, each hour like a day. The imagination conjures far worse horrors than reality usually delivers, but knowing this doesn't make the waiting any easier. The fire pops softly, sending up a small shower of sparks that dance briefly in the darkness before dying. The sound makes several of the men look up from their private contemplations, their faces momentarily visible in the orange glow. These are faces marked by weather and war, by years of campaigning in foreign lands. They are faces that have seen friends fall and enemies die, that have looked upon the aftermath of great victories and crushing defeats. Yet tonight, in this quiet grove, they look almost childlike in their vulnerability. Stripped of the pomp and ceremony that usually surrounds knighthood, they are simply men facing an uncertain tomorrow. Men who miss their homes, their families, their warm beds and familiar hearths. Men who wonder if they will ever see England again. Sir Edmund rises from his log and walks slowly to the edge of the clearing, where the darkness of the forest begins. The night air is cool against his face, carrying the scent of damp earth and dying leaves. Autumn is coming early this year, and already some of the oak leaves have begun to turn gold at their edges. By the time they return home, if they return home, the harvest will be complete and winter will be settling over the countryside like a familiar blanket. He listens to the sounds of the night. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls, its voice lonely and wild. Closer to camp, he can hear the soft conversations of the men-at-arms, the common soldiers who serve as infantry and support. Their voices are quieter than usual tonight, subdued by the same anticipation that grips the knights. War may be their profession, but that doesn't make it any less frightening when the moment arrives to put theory into practice. The darkness seems deeper here at the forest's edge, as if the trees are holding secrets that daylight might reveal. Sir Edmund finds himself wondering what other armies have camped in these woods, what other men have stood where he stands now, watching the stars and counting the hours until battle. The land holds memories in its soil, stories written in blood and buried beneath seasons of rain and snow. A gentle breeze stirs the leaves above his head, creating a soft rustling that sounds almost like whispered prayers. Sir Edmund closes his eyes and lets the sound wash over him, finding in it a strange comfort that the silence couldn't provide. The wind carries with it the faint smell of smoke from distant fires. Other camps scattered across the countryside, other men waiting for the same dawn. When he opens his eyes again, he notices that the eastern horizon has begun to show the faintest suggestion of change. Not light yet, but a lessening of the absolute darkness that has held the world in its grip. Dawn is still hours away, but time moves differently in these hushed moments before battle. Minutes crawl by like wounded animals, each second heavy with possibility and dread. Behind him, he hears the soft scrape of metal on leather as Thomas continues his work. The boy has been with him for 3 years now, learning the ways of war and chivalry through observation and practice. Tonight, Thomas moves with unusual care, as if each piece of equipment is precious beyond measure. Perhaps it is. Tomorrow, these tools of war might be all that stands between life and death. Sir Edmund returns to the dying fire and settles himself once more on the log. The warmth from the embers barely reaches him now, but he finds comfort in watching the slow dance of red and orange among the ashes. Fire has always been humanity's companion in the darkness, a small defiance against the vast indifference of night. Even here, in this temporary camp that will be gone by tomorrow's sunset, the fire creates a circle of civilization in the wilderness. Sir William's eyes open, and he looks across the clearing at his younger companion. Cannot sleep either? His voice is barely audible, a whisper that somehow carries clearly in the still air. Sleep seems a luxury we cannot afford tonight, Sir Edmund replies, his own voice equally soft. Though I suspect we could use the rest. Rest will come when it comes, Sir William says, shifting his position against the oak tree. I learned long ago not to force what cannot be forced. The body knows when it needs sleep and when it needs to stay alert. The older knight's words carry the weight of experience, of battles fought and survived, of nights like this one spent in quiet contemplation of mortality. There is wisdom in his acceptance, a peace that comes only from having faced death so many times that it has become a familiar acquaintance, rather than a stranger to be feared. Thomas looks up from his work, his young face pale in the dim light. Sir Edmund, may I ask you something? Of course, lad. Do you ever grow accustomed to this feeling, this weight in your chest before a battle? Sir Edmund considers the question carefully. The boy deserves an honest answer, not empty reassurance or false bravado. In my experience, Thomas, a man who stops feeling that weight has either become a fool or a monster. Fear keeps us alive. It makes us careful, makes us think before we act. The trick is not to let it paralyze you when the moment comes to move. But how do you know when that moment arrives? You'll know, Sir William interjects softly. Your body will know before your mind does. Trust it. The conversation lapses into comfortable silence again. These are not profound revelations, merely the shared understanding of men who have chosen a life that regularly brings them to places like this grove, to moments like this quiet hour before dawn. They speak in the shorthand of soldiers, where a few words can convey what volumes of poetry might struggle to express. Somewhere in the camp, one of the younger knights begins to hum quietly to himself. The melody is an old song, something learned in childhood perhaps, or picked up in a tavern during better times. The tune drifts through the darkness like a ghost of happier days, reminding them all that life exists beyond this temporary encampment, beyond tomorrow's battle, beyond the endless cycle of war that has brought them here. The horses have grown quieter now, as if they too sense that dawn is approaching. Their breathing creates small clouds in the cold air, and occasionally one will snort softly or stamp a hoof against the ground. These animals are partners in the strange dance of medieval warfare, carrying their riders into combat with a loyalty that transcends understanding. Tomorrow, some of these horses will return riderless, their eyes wide with confusion and grief that mirrors their human companions. Sir Edmund finds himself thinking of Thunder, his destrier, and the bond they have forged over years of campaigning together. The great black horse has carried him safely through more battles than he can count, has responded to the subtle pressure of knees and reins with an intelligence that sometimes seems almost human. If he falls tomorrow, what will become of Thunder? The thought troubles him more than it should, perhaps. But in these quiet hours before battle, the mind fixes on strange details. The the eastern sky has begun to show the faintest hint of grey now, though full dawn is still far off. Time continues its slow, inexorable march toward morning, toward the moment when trumpets will sound and banners will unfurl, and the careful silence of this camp will be shattered by the controlled chaos of preparation for war. But for now, the silence holds. For now, these men can sit with their thoughts and their memories, can tend to their equipment and their prayers, can simply exist in this suspended moment between the certainty of night and the uncertainty of day. The grove protects them like a mother's embrace, the ancient oak standing guard over these temporary visitors who have sought shelter beneath their branches. Thomas has finished his inventory and now sits beside his master's armor, his hands folded in his lap. The boy's eyes are bright with unshed tears, though whether from fear or cold or some deeper emotion Sir Edmund cannot tell. Youth carries its own burden in times like these, the weight of inexperience combined with an imagination that can conjure horrors beyond counting. "Tell me about your home, Thomas," Sir Edmund says quietly, "about your family." The boy's face brightens slightly at the invitation to speak of better things. "My father is a blacksmith, my lord. He has a forge near the village green, and in the mornings you can hear his hammer ringing across the fields. My mother tends a garden behind our house, grows herbs and vegetables. She makes the finest soup in 3 counties, or so my father claims. And do you miss the sound of that hammer?" "Every day, my lord. Sometimes when I'm polishing your mail, I close my eyes and pretend I'm back in the forge, helping my father shape horseshoes and plowshares instead of instruments of war." The longing in the boy's voice is palpable, a homesickness that goes deeper than mere physical distance. It is the ache of innocence lost, of a world left behind that can never be fully recovered. Sir Edmund remembers that feeling, though the years have dulled its edge. The price of choosing this life, this profession of arms, is measured not only in physical scars, but in the gradual erosion of the simple certainties that make peacetime precious. The fire has died to mere ashes now, leaving only the faintest glow among the blackened wood. Sir Edmund stirs the remains with a stick, coaxing a few final sparks to life. They dance briefly in the darkness before fading, like tiny souls departing for whatever realm awaits beyond this world of steel and shadow. "My lord," Thomas whispers, his voice barely disturbing the stillness, "do you think the French knights are awake too, somewhere across these fields?" Sir Edmund considers this. Somewhere in the darkness, perhaps only a few miles distant, enemy campfires burn low while other men tend their weapons and wonder if they will see another sunset. French knights, men not so different from themselves, sit in their own circles of dying light and contemplate the same questions that plague every warrior before battle. Do their wives sleep peacefully tonight? Do their children dream of fathers who might never return home? "I imagine they are," he replies softly. "Fear and hope are not English virtues alone. A French blade cuts no deeper than ours, but neither does a French prayer carry less weight. The observation hangs in the air like incense. In daylight, these men across the fields are enemies to be defeated, obstacles between victory and disgrace. But in these dark hours before dawn, they are simply other souls caught in the same web of duty and honor that has brought everyone to this place. The brotherhood of arms extends beyond banners and languages, binding together all who have chosen this harsh profession. A horse whickers softly in the darkness, and Sir William shifts against his oak tree. The old knight's weathered hands move slowly, methodically working oil into his sword belt. Each motion is deliberate, almost ritualistic. He has performed these same preparations countless times before, in camps from Scotland to Gascony, and the familiar rhythm brings comfort, even when peace of mind remains elusive. "I fought at Halidon Hill," Sir William murmurs, speaking to no one in particular. 20 years pass now. The Scots came at us up that muddy slope, and we cut them down like wheat before the scythe. Brave men, every one of them. Their king died well, sword in hand. His words drift through the camp like smoke from the dead fire. Several of the younger knights lean forward slightly, drawn by the quiet authority in his voice. Stories of past battles serve a purpose in moments like these, connecting the present fear to victories already won, reminding nervous hearts that survival is possible even when odds seem impossible. The waiting before that battle felt exactly like this, Sir William continues. Time crawling by like a wounded animal. Every sound magnified, every shadow suspect. But when the sun rose and the trumpets sounded, all that nervous energy transformed into something else entirely. The fear remained, but it became useful. Sharp. Thomas wipes his nose on his sleeve, a gesture so young and human that it breaks through the carefully maintained dignity of the moment. He is still more boy than man, despite months of training and the mail shirt that hangs loose on his thin shoulders. Tomorrow will age him considerably, assuming he lives to see tomorrow's end. The darkness has begun to thin almost imperceptibly at the eastern horizon. Not light yet, but a lessening of the absolute black that has held dominion over the night. Dawn remains hours away, but time moves differently in these suspended moments. Each minute stretches like molten lead, heavy with possibility and dread. Sir Edmund rises and walks among the sleeping forms of the men-at-arms. These common soldiers lie wrapped in their cloaks, some snoring softly, others staring wide-eyed at the stars above. They carry spears and crossbows rather than knightly swords, wear leather instead of mail, but they face the same uncertain tomorrow, as their bet easier because they have fewer choicesters. Perhaps their sleep comes to make. When battle comes, they will form their ranks and follow orders. The weight of command, the burden of decisions that might save or damn entire companies, rests on other shoulders. One of the foot soldiers, a grizzled veteran named Watt, catches Sir Edmund's eye and nods respectfully. His weathered face bears the scars of previous campaigns, and his hands rest easily on his crossbow. Men like Watt form the backbone of any army, steady and reliable as stone foundations. They ask few questions and expect little beyond regular pay and the occasional chance to loot a fallen enemy. Their loyalty is practical rather than romantic, but no less valuable for its earthbound nature. "Cannot sleep, Sir Knight," Watt whispers, his voice rough from years of shouting orders over the din of battle. "Sleep seems reluctant to visit our camp tonight," Sir Edmund replies. "How fare your men?" "Well enough, my lord. They've seen worse odds than tomorrow offers. The lads from Devon fought at Duplin Moor, and those from Yorkshire remember Neville's Cross. French steel cuts no deeper than Scottish when soldiers' pragmatic assessment carries all said and done. The more comfort than any noble speech about honour and duty. These men have survived other battles, other nights like this one. They know the difference between bravado and genuine confidence, between fear that paralyzes and fear that sharpens the senses for combat." Sir Edmund returns to his place beside the dead fire, settling once more onto the log that has become his throne for these dark hours. The wood is smooth beneath his hands, polished by weather and time into something almost comfortable. He wonders how many other men have sat on this same fallen trunk in other years, waiting for other dawns that might bring death or glory, or the strange mixture of both that defines a soldier's life. Thomas has curled up beside the carefully arranged armour, using his master's shield as a pillow. The boy's breathing has finally grown deep and regular, though his sleep appears troubled. His face twitches occasionally, and once he murmurs something unintelligible that might be his mother's name. Youth's ability to find rest, even in the most trying circumstances, is both enviable and touching. In a few hours, that same youth will will be expected to perform with the coolness of a veteran. Sir William begins to hum quietly, the same melody that drifted through the camp earlier. The tune is ancient, older perhaps than the oaks that shelter them. It speaks of home fires and harvest festivals, of village greens where children dance while their elders watch and smile. The music becomes a bridge between the world of war and the world of peace, reminding these men that both exist, that tomorrow's battle is not the sum total of existence. The horses have grown restless again, perhaps sensing the approaching change that humans can only feel as a vague unease. Thunder tosses his great black head and stamps his hooves, his breath steaming in the cold air. The Destria's eyes catch what little light remains from the stars, and for a moment they seem almost human in their intelligence and concern. Sir Edmund reaches into his pouch and withdraws the lock of Margaret's hair, running the silken strands between his fingers. The auburn colour is invisible in the darkness, but he knows its shade as well as he knows his own name. This small token carries with it the scent of lavender from their garden, the memory of summer afternoons spent walking hand in hand through fields of barley, the promise of a future that might still be possible if fortune smiles tomorrow. She used to braid flowers into her hair during harvest time, he whispers to the darkness. Daisies and cornflowers, sometimes a sprig of rosemary. She said it brought good luck to the crops. Thomas stirs in his sleep at the sound of his master's voice, but does not wake. The boy's dreams are his own, and Sir Edmund hopes they carry him far from this grove, far from tomorrow's uncertainties, back to that forge where his father's hammer rings out across peaceful fields. The grey line along the eastern horizon has grown slightly more distinct, though true dawn remains distant. Time continues its inexorable advance toward the moment when silence will give way to the controlled chaos of preparation. Soon, the camp will come alive with the sounds of men donning armor and checking weapons, of horses being saddled and banners unfurled. The intimate quiet of these dark hours will shatter like glass beneath a hammer, replaced by the urgent business of war. But for now, the silence holds. For now, these men can exist in this suspended moment between the certainty of night and the uncertainty of day. The ancient oaks stand guard over their temporary guests, their branches forming a cathedral of living wood above the small circle of human hopes and fears. Sir Edmund closes his eyes and listens to the night sounds that surround their camp. An owl calls from somewhere deep in the forest, its haunting voice answered by another from the opposite direction. The conversation between these creatures of darkness seems to carry messages that human ears cannot quite decipher. Ancient wisdom, perhaps, or simply the eternal dialogue between hunter and prey that defines existence in the wild places of the world. The first pale fingers of dawn are beginning to touch the eastern sky now, and with that light will come the end of this quiet vigil. Sir Edmund and his companions will soon trade their whispered conversations and private fears for the harsh clarity of battle. The grove will empty. The horses will carry their riders toward whatever fate awaits at Crécy, and this moment of suspended humanity will become just another memory in the long chronicle of war. But perhaps, in these final minutes of darkness, we've glimpsed something more enduring than the clash of steel and the thunder of hooves. In the gentle hum of Sir William's ancient melody, in Thomas's dreams of his father's forge, in the careful way these men tend their weapons and their fears, we see the persistent thread of humanity that runs through even the darkest chapters of history. These nights may ride to glory or doom when the sun rises, but tonight, in this quiet grove, they are simply men missing home. Sleep well, knowing that courage often looks not like fearlessness, but like ordinary people doing extraordinary things despite the weight in their chests. Rest easy in the knowledge that even in history's most violent moments, there were always those who remembered to be human first, warriors second. And may your dreams carry you to peaceful places, far from the sound of steel on steel, where fathers still work their forges and mothers tend their gardens, and the only battles fought are against the gentle pull of sleep itself. Until next time, let the quiet darkness hold you, just as it held those nights so many centuries ago.